I just want to shoot myself. I just want to shoot myself. It's not fair, Welcome to the Stratosphere Lounge, episode 24, and this technical restart, and then the host has decided to hit the record button so that those of you who are not watching live can actually watch it later. My God, all I need is I just need a producer. I just need one guy. I think I'm the only guy in the world who does this by himself, and you just get so wrapped up in being the host and trying to think about what you're going to talk about that the next thing you know, you're talking for 5 minutes and you forget to start the recording. So it's episode 24 of the Stratosphere Lounge. We're going to do a short show tonight. It gets shorter and shorter every time I make a mistake like this. So anyway, let's get right to it because we got a couple questions we want to cover. And I was talking to the air, apparently, about a question from Anthony Cazillo, who said, is there any advice for a young man entering college or becoming an adult? And as I said, it's a very tough economy and there are very limited job opportunities out there. But if you do follow this simple step, then you will be working not only immediately, but be working for the rest of your life. Take the worst job that you can find. Let's say it's the fry station at McDonald's, and I'm not joking either. What you want to do, if you want to succeed in life, is very, 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 very simple. If your shift starts at 8 o'clock in the morning, you need to be there at 7:30, and you need to be in place and start working at quarter to late at the latest, right? You need to do your shift. You need to do all of your work. If you see other things that aren't getting done, you need to do those things without being asked. You have to be visibly doing this, and you can't showboat it and you can't grandstand it because trust me on this one. Given the quality of workers out there, given the quality of the workforce out there, any manager will immediately notice extra effort, especially if it's extra effort that's uncalled for in terms of his part and unglorified on your part. If you're the kind of guy who doesn't have to, or girl, who doesn't have to wait to be told to clean up a mess that somebody else spilled that's not your responsibility, if you just step up and hustle and do it, somebody's going to pay attention to that. So whether it's that, if you're in an office building, you have to be there before the boss shows up, and you have to be there after he leaves. And honest to God, that is it. If you do that, if you have the fortitude, the discipline, the humility, the courage, and the foresight to do this one simple thing, you get there before your supervisor does, and you stay there after he leaves, your life is greased rails from that point. It's honestly just that simple. And as the quality of the workforce continues to decline, that quality I mentioned will become ever more valuable. So imagine the situation. Let's say you're working at the fry station at McDonald's, and the manager sees that you came in early, and not just once and not just for a couple days, you just always come in early. You work hard. If you see somebody else is in trouble, you do extra work to help them. You take a short lunch or all of your lunch, but never more than your lunch. You come back, and at the end of the day, you say to this guy, looks like I'm done. Is there anything else you need? I honestly think it would be a matter of days. It certainly wouldn't be much more than weeks or a month or two before you're offered an assistant manager position. And then you do the same thing as the assistant manager. You come in before the boss. You stay after the boss leaves. You volunteer wherever you can. And you just hustle. Now, after a relatively short period of time, a few months at the outside, I would say, if you haven't seen anything like any kind of an advancement or any kind of an opportunity, then you need to go into your supervisor, your immediate supervisor, and say, sir, I've been here for a couple months. I feel like I'm doing my best to make sure that all the work that I'm assigned gets done. I feel like it is getting done. I feel like I could handle more responsibilities. I'm not asking you to pay me anymore right now. What I'd like to do is I'd like to ask if you would give me some additional responsibilities at no additional pay for a trial period that we can agree on, maybe a week or two. And if it turns out that I do that job well, then we could talk about increasing the compensation. But I'm more than willing to take the risk. It's entirely my risk, and I'd be happy to do the extra work at no additional pay, just to show you that I can do it because I believe I can do more than I'm doing now. The guy's going to fall down dead. He's going to faint dead away. He's going to faint dead away. He's not going to know what to do with you. He's certainly not going to want to let you go. And not going to want to let you go means things like raises, and it means more and more authority. And you probably don't want to work at McDonald's for the rest of your life, but you probably could be an assistant manager and a manager there in very short order. And then you can get the staff to work, and you can train other people on these things. And then when the time comes for you to make a move, you'll have on your resume June of 2012, Fry Station. August 2012, assistant manager. October 2012, night manager, whatever the case may be. You'll get the recommendation of a lifetime, and then you can do that wherever you go. Wherever you go. It's just that one simple rule. Honest to God, it's magic. Everybody will tell you it's magic. Because what ultimately a businessman and an employer wants is, first of all, he wants an employee who does a good job. He wants somebody he can count on. He has his basic practical needs, right? As a person who's running a business, he has practical needs. He needs somebody to run the fry station. He needs somebody to come into the dry cleaning shop. He needs practical needs. Then he has a second level of practical needs as a businessman, as a manager. And this could be any business. It's a law firm. It's anything. Doctor's office. Anything. He needs somebody to do the job. Then on a level above somebody to come and do the job, he needs somebody he can trust to do things like turn off the lights and lock the door at the end of the night, or to handle the money, or so on. And the people that he can trust will get paid more, and they'll get higher responsibilities. They'll move up. And beyond somebody who he needs and somebody who he trusts, then there's a level beyond even that. And this is the level that you've got to be striving for, Tony or Anthony. You've got to be striving to be the kind of person he needs, the kind of person he trusts, and then finally the kind of person he likes and admires. Because if he sees himself in you, then he will do something that every employer in the world does. I've never seen a successful person not do this and not be bending over backwards, anxious to do it. He will see something in you that reminds you of him, and he will take you under his wing, and he will give you every single opportunity within his power. And if the time comes where you outgrow whatever position he can offer you, because over time he'll offer you the best position he has, if it turns out that you've outgrown that, then he will make an effort to find you the kind of work you want to, and he'll give you the kind of recommendation that you don't give your own son, right? It's really just that simple. Honestly, it's just really that simple. Just to give you an example of how it worked in my life, my first job was an extremely, by my lights, an extremely glamorous job. First job I got was working at the Miami Planetarium. I was 13 years old, and I got the job because they told me that there was no job. I walked in, saw a planetarium show as a space kid. I was into astronomy and into physics and flying, and was going to be an astronaut. And this particular planetarium in Miami was, in fact, a space flight simulator. You could do RPY, roll, pitch, and yaw motions with it. Astronauts could train on that thing. And so I wanted to work there. And I went in on the weekend and said, I'd love to come here and work here and take tickets and clean up vomit and sweep the floors. And they said, well, we don't have any money to pay you. It's a museum. Sorry. I said, you don't have to pay me. I'll volunteer. And they didn't believe me. And they let me work that day. They didn't believe I'd be back the next day, but I was back the next day. And then after 2 weeks, they took pity on me and they started paying me. They paid me $2.15 an hour. I have in my desk drawer at home a paycheck from the Museum of Science in Miami. It was dated 1973, and I think it's for $37.50. It was 2 weeks' pay. And this doesn't require intelligence. It doesn't require knowledge. It doesn't require background or skill, but it requires something. It requires desire, really, more than anything. And then the final end of that story, which I feel like I told just a few weeks ago, while I was working as a ticket taker, as an usher, I watched the console operators. I watched everything they did. I learned from watching them. And then on my own time, I would come in early and stay late, and I would practice, so that when somebody needed a show done, when Jack Horkheimer needed a show done and no one else could do it, I knew how to do it. And he took a chance on me. You got to have somebody who'll do that. That's a big part of it. Took a chance on me, and when my chance came, I didn't blow the chance because I was prepared. So do your job. Do more than your job. Get in early. Stay late. If you see anybody else in trouble, help them with their work. Do their work. Don't showboat for the credit. Believe me, people will notice. And study and prepare for the job that is ahead of you, that is above you, so that you can walk in and do it. And just do it. So anyway, that's my advice to young men entering college and becoming an adult. Because if you take that attitude, you will develop character. You will not only develop character, if you can start with that attitude, you will have character when you begin, and life will be a lot simpler for you. And the worse your cohorts get, the simpler your life is going to be. Let's move on. Do I want to take this one? Yes. Beth Larson asked a question, and I'm going to paraphrase it here. It's quite a long question. She's basically saying how she's a student, and she had a professor, and they were talking about Benghazi, and the professor didn't want to talk about it and just said it's a non-story, basically, and just, basically said it's not an issue. It's like they keep bringing up the same thing, and it's completely pointless, and why do the Republicans do this, and so on. And she finally just said, people after class said, I don't even know who Benghazi is. So ultimately, the question, I think, is what's wrong with people, and how do you get around this, and how do you argue? And I'll give you a simple explanation here, Beth. When you're dealing with liberals, I learned this from Andrew Breitbart. Every single time you deal with liberals, they will create a trap for you. The trap will be built into the question. The trap will be built into a response to your answer, but there will be an ongoing trap for every question that's ever asked a conservative by every liberal professor, by every liberal, newspaper reporter for the unbiased news. And Breitbart saw this very clearly, and once Andrew showed me how to do it, it's second nature for me now. Anytime you're arguing with a liberal, anytime you're arguing with especially somebody in authority like a professor or somebody who's a student trying to make a case, mark my words, because I've never seen the exception to this. There will be buried in the question, in the assumption, in the response, somewhere in there will be buried unearned moral superiority on their part. Unearned moral superiority. They'll also try for intellectual superiority, but there will always be something about how the question is phrased or how their response to a question is phrased that positions them as one of the good, caring, loving, decent people, and either overtly or covertly, you will be one of the evil, mean-spirited, rotten, no-good-for-nothing, people-hating, baby-killer people. It will be in everything that you deal with. It'll be in global warming. It'll be in Benghazi. It'll be in everything. And so what you have to learn how to do, no matter what the question is you have to learn how to spot where their moral superiority, I keep saying it's not moral superiority, it's unearned moral superiority. Find out where their unearned moral superiority is and attack them there directly. Attack them there directly. So if the guy says Benghazi is not a story, you say, well, sir, with all due respect, I'm sure it's a story to Ambassador Stevens' family because he's the first sitting ambassador to be murdered in the line of duty in 35 years. So I'm sure it's a story to him. I'm sure it's a story to the two men that risked their lives to go back to the embassy and try to get that man and the other men out of there. And they did get some people out of there, and they fought for 6 hours against overwhelming odds with incoming RPGs waiting for help that didn't come. Now, if you think that the Democratic Party and Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton are doing a terrific job, what would you say to those two men? Because it sounds to me like you're a callous, heartless, soulless individual whose smug sense of moral superiority is simply overlooking genuine tragedy on the part of other people, and you don't seem to care about anything. What kind of a person are you? Are you really that much of a heartless? Are you really that much of a heartless, soulless individual that the death of a sitting ambassador means nothing to you? His murder and alleged sodomy in the streets means nothing to you? The death of people who could have escaped and ran away from the danger but instead ran to the sound of gunfire, that means nothing to you? These people called for help for 6 hours from the most powerful government in the world headed by your guy, and that means nothing to you? Go right straight at their moral superiority and knock it out from underneath them, and then they don't know what to do anymore. I'll give you two more quick examples to make the case. I've told this story before too. I was at my old job. I was the only conservative in a floor of liberal TV producers, or 40 of them. And this new woman got a job, and she came in. I'd never seen her before in my life. Just walked up to me basically and said, "So you must be that conservative I heard about." And I said, "Yes. Hi, I'm Bill. How are you? Nice to meet you." She says, "So I guess you're against protecting the environment, huh?" In other words, you're a mean-spirited, low-life capitalist dirtbag who wants the planet to burn, but I'm a loving, caring, Gaia-loving, sustainable, moral, decent, loving person who drives a Prius, so therefore you're rotten and I'm great. And when she said, "I guess you don't want to protect the environment," I said, "Well, what environment do you want to protect? what do you mean? I said, do you want to protect the 1975 environment? Do you want to protect the 1812 environment? Do you want to protect the environment of 600 BC? Do you want to protect the environment of 200 million BC? The Earth's been much hotter than it is now. It's been much colder than it is now. There's been 8 times more carbon dioxide in the air than there is today. There's been less carbon dioxide, but not a lot less, because we're darn near the lower level of carbon dioxide. If we have a whole lot less carbon dioxide than we have now, plants will die and they won't come back. So what environment do you want to protect? The center of the country was once under 200 feet of a shallow inland sea. Kansas used to be teeming with palm trees and hundreds of thousands of species of dinosaurs and pterodactyls, and now it's a wasteland. It's a frozen, low CO2 wasteland. So which climate do you want to protect? And that was the end of that. She literally just stormed out of the room. Couldn't answer that question because it took away her moral high ground. She wanted me to go to hell with you. It's my problem if I want to watch the earth burn. And she was expecting the, you don't give a damn about anything, or the baby killers, or the, you like watching children burn, as we all do, certainly. And so you take away their moral high ground. And the final example I'll give you, just to show you how it works, because 3 examples make a line, or 3 points make a line, I should say, is I was at Oberlin College, and I was talking to the most liberal college in the country, and I said I was against affirmative action, and in the speech and during the Q&A, this young white kid was, of course, standing up for Black America, because he apparently feels that Black America can't stand up for themselves, and you need young white college students from Colorado to stand up for Black people. And he basically said, so you're against affirmative action, huh? I said, I certainly am. And he said, how come? I said, because I'm not a racist, that's why. He says, what do you mean? I said, I'm not a racist, you're the racist. You're the one who's in favor of affirmative action. You're the one who believes that Black people should be able to get into college with a 650 while white kids need an 800. I'm not like you. I'm not built the same way you are. I don't think Black people are inferior. I think Black people can get as much of a score on a college exam as a white person can if they study as hard. I think it's a disgusting and a reprehensible philosophy that you hold, this idea that Black people are so inferior to white people that they have to have special lower standards set for them. I think it's a disgraceful and appalling thing to believe. And that was the end of that. So that's how you do it, Beth. Listen to what they're saying, look for the unearned moral superiority, attack this directly, and go at it. Yeah, I feel like I've carried this one before, too. Somebody said, it seems like I've done this podcast. 3 of these stories are old stories. I just ended up on them by answering these questions. So here's one I haven't talked about before. Boehner is the speaker again. This is Brian Asanowitz. Boehner's the speaker again. Thoughts? I'm disappointed. And Banny Unmar writes, was re-electing John Boehner to speaker a mistake by the Republican House? Who would you like to have seen get the nod? After I gave that speech, it's just interesting. This is not I'm not trying to brag or anything. It's just an interesting piece of pseudo-history that may or may not be true. But after I did the Horowitz speech, the one about what Mitt Romney would have said, it got seen by a lot of people. Apparently did 1 million hits on that other website before they took it down, because apparently 3 points make a pattern, 2 points make a line. Because apparently there was somebody saw somebody talking about Iran or Muslims or something, and so somebody filed a complaint with whatever that video service was. It wasn't Vimeo, it was somebody else, and they somebody had a complaint, and somebody's feelings were hurt, so they took down the entire David Horowitz channel. Or certainly they took down the entire event, my speech included. Got seen by about 1 million people. It's on YouTube. I'm very proud of that speech. Anyway, the point I'm trying to make is, after that speech was over, and after the evening was over, we went to the bar, and I'm in there, and I look up, and I see a guy at the bar, kind of an older guy, just leaning up against the bar, chatting, looked like he'd been sitting there for a while, and it turns out it was Newt frickin' Gingrich, and looked like a perfectly normal person to me. That's the strange thing about getting close to big people. It's amazing how normal they are. And so there was Newt Gingrich, and I went to the back, and a lot of people had never seen me before, and everybody wanted to talk to me. And I'm sitting at this table, and this guy said to me, he said, you know what I'm going to do, Bill? I said, what are you going to do? I'd never met this guy in my life. He says, I'm going to nominate you for Speaker of the House. And I said, I have no desire to be a representative. I can't imagine a worse life than sitting there and listening to people gas and talk and listen to the sound of their own voice. The only voice I want to hear is my own voice. That's why I'm in this business. And the guy said, he said, you don't have to be an elected representative to be the Speaker of the House. I said, come on. He said, I don't know if this is true, but he said, nope, all you have to do is get the most votes to be Speaker of the House. And just the idea of that was actually really interesting to me, that you could just basically elect, somebody, Joe the plumber or Bill Whittle or whatever. As long as you had enough votes to elect him, you're the Speaker of the House. That's really interesting because I think John Boehner's a good guy. I think he's a nice man. He strikes me as a nice guy, decent guy, honest guy, hardworking guy. But John Boehner is the worst possible guy that we can have, especially at this point. Oh, he's not the worst possible guy. There's 100 guys that are worse than that. But look, the Speaker of the House of Representatives right now is the ranking Republican. He's the ranking conservative. He's the most visible Republican in the country right now. So it is a position of relative power. I would say it's certainly more powerful than the vice president, and second only to the president in terms of your ability to actually influence policy and in terms of the soapbox. It's nothing like the bully pulpit that the president has, but it's second. And what you need, especially in opposition and especially when you're demoralized for Speaker of the House, is you need a firebrand, and you need somebody with Churchillian courage. Churchillian. You need the kind of courage that Churchill had, and he must have woken up every day just terrified. You need to get out there every day and just shake your fist at the skies while those German bombers are flying back to Germany, and we're going to get them. We're going to fight them on the beaches. We're going to fight them in the cities. We will never surrender. All I have to offer is blood, toil, tears, and sweat. You need to get out there. Now, I can give you an example of the kind of thing tactically. There's been a lot of talk about the Republicans basically just lying down and saying, you know what, we're going to give you your spending bill, we're going to give you your tax hikes on the rich, we're going to show you that your policies, we can't stop you, we can't reverse this, we're going to get blamed for it anyway, so off you go, and we're going to give you the ball for 2 years so the American people can see that you own it and that you own it. Now, I don't know if that's a good strategy or not. It might be a good strategy, but it's a catastrophe if you have a speaker like John Boehner. Because if you're going to run with that plan, if you're going to run with a plan to show how awful the Democrats are, you need a speaker who says this every single day. I feel like I've had this discussion a week ago, too. You got a lot of reruns today. I don't know why. And these questions didn't seem like, but basically Boehner needs to say every single day, look, this is the 54th month of unemployment above 8%. This is the 27th month of this. This is the 4th month of this. This is the 9th month of this. Their failures are epic and endemic. We keep saying again and again and again and again and again, this, and this. But John Boehner's not that guy. Can anybody give me a John Boehner quote? Does anybody know what John Boehner believes? I don't. I know he was reelected. I think we could do a lot better than that. Let's move on. Hello, Mr. Whittle. This is from Harley Gal. Says, what do you think the worst threat to America is besides Obama? Is it the Middle East, the UN, China? It's the lack of virtue in American culture. That's the greatest threat to America. The lack of virtue in American culture is the reason that Barack Obama is elected. It's the reason we have the kind of representatives we have. It's all of these things. We are a government of people who are elected who are supposed to be able to govern themselves. And when the fabric of American society gets so thin, when morality becomes so rare, and families fall apart, and there are no fathers to show young men how to be men and not be violent predators and all this other stuff, when all of this laziness and lack of moral decency and lack of education and lack of concern, this whole movement now, I don't know if you've been watching what these crazy nutty kids today, but they've got this expression they just love called swag. I don't need to go to school, I've got swag. I don't need to get a job, I've got swag. I don't need an education, I've got swag. I don't need to read, I've got swag. What is swag? Well, swag is swagger. It's attitude, man. As long as I got the attitude, as long as I got the swagger, I don't need any of that stuff. I just developed jaundice. Here's a white balance for you. Ta-da. And so what we've got is we've got immoral people, and we've got ignorant people. We got people who are not terrified of their ignorance. They should be terrified of their ignorance, but they're not. They're proud of it. And that puts us in enormous trouble, because the entire idea of our system of life is that we govern ourselves. And if we're not fit to govern ourselves, then other people will be more than willing to step up and govern us for ourselves. And we see that all the time. So every single time we see something where people are unwilling to accept the responsibility for their own freedom, then somebody else, usually somebody in government, is more than willing to step up and take that pesky freedom off of our shoulders in exchange for doing the job we should be doing for ourselves. Here's a little statistic that I think we mentioned after the election. This will make you feel good. 25, 30, 40 million conservatives set out the last two elections. And we got a hold of some, I don't want to call them internal polls, but some specific research that basically indicated that something like 20 million hardcore evangelical Christians, which are the most conservative people in the country, and other conservatives, some enormous number, something like 100 times the margin of victory, don't vote because they're not registered to vote. And when they ask these conservatives why they're not registered to vote, they say they don't want to vote because they don't want to register, rather because they don't want to be called for jury duty. Isn't that nice? Here we are supposed to be the people that are all about civic duty and civic responsibility, and conservatives don't register to vote because they don't want to get jury duty, because they have jobs and they have lives. I understand that. Jury duty is an incredible pain. But you go, it's your civic duty. And the ultimate irony is that the juror pool is not culled from voter registration. It's culled from driver's license pool. But 20 million people aren't registered to vote. Conservatives, they say they're not registered to vote because they don't want jury duty. And a lot of people, some significant portion of the NRA, 25, 30, 40%, is not registered to vote because they figure if they're registered to vote, and then the government will know who they are and where they live, and then they'll come and get their guns. My response to that is, if it ever gets to the point where they come and get your guns, they're going to come and get your guns with a tank. And the AR-15 is not terribly effective against a tank. The way you stop these people from getting your guns is you get involved in the political process and make sure these people don't have the votes to put the tanks on the road to get your guns. Look, I'm all about the Second Amendment, and I think that the Second Amendment is the last line of defense against tyranny. I have an AR-15 and a 45. And nevertheless, the idea that you can protect yourself from politics by getting out of politics should be proven by now to be a pretty bad idea. Most of us have spent 40, 50 years letting the left take over everything because we just, it's none of my business, I don't care. Well, you may not be interested in politics, but politics is interested in you, and politics is coming after you, and you can either get in this fight and win elections, or you can fall back on your weapons. Now, I have weapons to fall back on too. I'm not mocking this idea. On the contrary, I think the fact that we have weapons to fall back on is the only thing stopping these people from doing what they really want to do. But I am also telling you that if we let this government get to the place where it could get to, then small arms are not going to do the job. They're not going to do the job. We have got to get into the political fight and outvote these people while we still can. And the horror of it all is that the liberals turn out everybody they have, and we turn out half the people we have. And if we turned out 60% of the people we had, we'd never lose again. If we turned out all of the people we had, the liberalism would disappear from the culture because they would realize they're outnumbered. The first thing that Lenin did when he tried to come to power in Russia was he named his political party the Bolsheviks. And the Bolsheviks in Russian means the majority party. They weren't the majority party. They were a sliver. They were a few, 10, 15, 20% of the population. But Lenin decided to name them the Bolsheviks. And so everybody said, oh, they're the majority party. They're the party that everybody belongs to. This is what the liberals have done here. The liberals have taken over the media. They've taken over the culture. And 10% or 15% of the population sets the tone for the rest of the country and makes every single one of the majority feel that we're a minority in our own country. And I'm getting comments from my live stream here saying that the military still has honor. Of course they have honor. And of course huge numbers of the military would not fire on people who are legally owning firearms. I have no doubt that the military would just simply, largely in mass, refuse to obey that order, but some of them would. And then you start having to ask yourself about things like Homeland Security, and apparently, I don't know how much of this is crazed, conspiracy theories, but I've heard fairly reliable reports that the Homeland Security Department has ordered 850 million rounds of hollow point ammunition. The Homeland Security Department. Obama talked during his first election campaign about a civilian army that would be as well armed as the U.S. military. I don't fear the military because only of the quality of the people in the military. But these paramilitary organizations, these new things, and I don't know. Look, our entire purpose of doing this show and my entire job as a pundit and all the things I do is not to say it's crazy to keep guns. On the contrary, it's the smartest thing we can do is keep ourselves armed. It's the best deterrent we have against this kind of government overreach. But my entire job as a persuader is to try to get people to make a change politically before we get to the point where we have to use these things. I don't ever want to see those guns used. I'm glad they're there, and I think like every one of you who owns your own guns, I'm pretty much mentally preparing myself and have prepared myself for the day when I may have to do it. But for God's sakes, can we all agree that this would be a catastrophe and we need to do everything other than that? So why don't we just get out and vote? Because here's the thing. The Stockholm Syndrome that the culture drives into your head. Oh, look, I got sick again. The culture drives into your head the idea that progressivism is inevitable, that the liberals will always win, that it's a giant ratchet, that once Obamacare is in place, you can't undo it, and all this other nonsense. It's just not true. We've voted down constitutional amendments before. We can vote down anything. We can vote Obamacare out the door. All we have to do is just go out and vote. And if we were outnumbered 2-1 or 3-1, I'd say we've got such a big uphill neighborhood to fight. But we don't. We outnumber these people 2-1. 4 people identify themselves as conservatives, 3 as independents, and 2 as liberals. We just have to show up, but we don't. So now my job and your job and everybody else's job is to convince people to show up. Now, to be fair, a lot of conservatives don't show up because a lot of conservatives don't feel like there are any conservative candidates out there. That's happened twice in a row now. And we are going to crack open this virtual presidency in January, and I'm going to show people what a conservative candidate sounds like so that the real conservative candidates can at least get some kind of idea, and maybe they'll pay attention and figure out how to sell some of these ideas, because as ideas damn near sell themselves. So, Harley Gal, I think the biggest threat to America is the quality of the American people's moral virtue. I think that's all of it. I think our position in the rest of the world is superb, actually, strangely enough. Things are horrible here. They just happen to be worse everywhere else. If this were a giant game of Risk and all of these countries were on the board and I had first pick, I'd take America instantly. I wouldn't take China, I wouldn't take Russia, I wouldn't take any. I'd take America instantly. So anyway, we're running out of time. I got to be out of here at 7 o'clock today. Now, in fairness, I've done a bunch of shows that have been 1 hour 45, 2 hours, 2:20 in some cases, so I have to be a little light on this one. Sorry. I'm going to skip a question on Aurora here. We'll get to that later. I've got a second, third, and fourth time question, so by God, we're going to knock these things out. Ivan Rayson says, second try. Where do we have proof that executive orders are unconstitutional? From what I understand from my history class last semester, executive orders were only to make internal changes in the government so long as it did not directly affect the people. And he says the first executive order he can recall is Andrew Jackson's species circular. I think I might have said they were unconstitutional earlier. I don't think that was the term I was looking for. I think what I probably meant to say was that they seem to me to be extra-constitutional. And without question, they have been horribly abused to the point now where a president will try to do something with token effort through the Congress, and if that doesn't succeed, he'll simply make it an executive order. Now, if you can go around the Congress and doing things by executive order, then there's no purpose for the Congress. If the President of the United States can simply issue orders and edicts and circumvent the Congress and have them have the effect of law, even though they're not law, then there's something fundamentally wrong with what's going on. I suspect that the misuse of executive orders follows the same general trajectory as the misuse of the Commerce Clause and the General Welfare Clause, which are actually extremely clear. There's nothing terribly vague about it. The Commerce Clause says that Congress shall have the power to regulate commerce among foreign powers, the states, foreign powers, and Indian tribes. If you're not a foreign power, if you're not an Indian tribe, and if you're not a state, as in Minnesota, then Congress can't touch your commerce. But they managed to chip away at that over 50, 60, 100 years and so on, and I think they're doing the same thing with these executive orders. I think they're a horrible abuse of power. I mentioned them in an afterburner I shot today, which I'll put up on the Facebook page within a day or two. It's called Rule of Lawlessness. Congress is economically lawless because they haven't passed a budget in 4 or 5 years. A budget is a means of controlling how much you spend. If you don't have a budget, you can't be over budget, can you? That's why Harry Reid's Democrats haven't passed a budget, because if you have a budget, you have a way of knowing how much over budget you are. And they don't want that. They want to just spend forever, so there's no budget. Barack Obama has made a number of rulings using executive orders that grant him, in time of emergency, absolute, just shocking levels of dictatorial power. And as I said in the afterburner, you might be able to make the case that during a terrific, catastrophic rivers of blood and plagues of frogs from the sky kind of a catastrophe, you might be able to make the case that the president should have that kind of power for a limited duration and under a very specific set of triggering situations. But this doesn't happen. He's basically put executive orders in place that would mean that, should he decide to nationalize, confiscate, and I think I read not public transportation, but civil transportation, meaning your car, he can do it. And when people say you have no legal right to do this, he'll say executive order, whatever it is, 19379 or whatever it is, and there you go. So when I say executive orders are unconstitutional, I probably meant to say they're extra-constitutional, which is to say that they were probably something that was put in there for convenience, like a paperclip, and now this paperclip has been fashioned into a deadly weapon to stab your eyes out with. That was not the original intention of the paperclip. So I'm going to find out a little more research. I'm going to talk about executive orders in the virtual presidency's inaugural address. And the virtual president's inaugural address will do two things. We'll call for a return to law, because as long as the government is obeying the law as outlined by the Constitution, which defines the federal government, then we don't have any problems whatsoever. The Constitution doesn't need to be rewritten. The Constitution doesn't need to be re-examined. The Constitution doesn't really need to be amended. We just have to follow it as written. And so I'm going to make the case for returning to lawfulness, because lawlessness in this rule by the elite is the natural state of mankind, and we all know where it ends. And the second thing I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about wealth creation, because if you can convince people that wealth can be created out of thin air, then all of the progressives' class warfare goes away, all of their progressive taxation goes away, all of their animosity towards businessmen and all of these things and corporations, it all goes away. If you can show people that people can create wealth out of thin air, then progressivism goes away. So that's what we're going to do in the inaugural. We're going to talk about a return to law, and we're going to talk about wealth creation. You do those two things, and I think the country is well on its way, because then you put the two things together and say, listen, if we get the federal government back in the box it was designed for, not an artificial box, not a new box, not destroy the government, if we just put the government back in the box that it was designed for, and you get this great, loathsome, horrid, obese, monstrous blob of useless weight off of the American people, then the American people will get into wealth creation mode in a way that no one has ever seen, and we will see the kind of lifestyles that we can't even imagine in this country. They will be spectacular. We don't have to go down this road of ruin and less and desperation and privation. There's more energy under our feet now available for industry than there was at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. Think of all the oil and gas and fuels that we've burned in the last 100 years, but our invention, our genius, our engineering, our ambition, and our profit motive have actually, I think, produced more. I think there's more energy available to us now than there has been when we started. That's a remarkable thing. And people say you can't compete with the Chinese because the Chinese have so much lower labor costs than we do. That's absolutely true. But if we have lower energy costs than the Chinese, then we can't compete with the Chinese. We're going to clean their clocks. We're going to uncork this genie again. We're going to get this government out of the way and let the government do the things that the government is supposed to do, which are very limited in number and relatively small in scale. Get them out of your life, and then you will go out and then you'll be able to do the one thing that America always allowed you to do, and that is very simple. America is the place where America should be the easiest place in the world to fail in. America is successful because it's always been the easiest place in the world for a person to go out and fail. And when you get back to the place where America becomes the easiest place in the world to fail in, the amount of success you will see will be absolutely unbelievable. Make it a place where you can go out there, start a business for $100 and fail, and you won't believe what's coming. There's so much repressed economic growth. It's like a coiled spring. I got about 10 minutes, and I got at least 2 more questions. So anyway, Ivan, I need to understand a little more about the history and the rulings on. I know only 2 of them have ever been overturned. I want to know a little more about what their structure is in the Constitution. That might be a job for the Virtual Research Brigade. In fact, it is, and it was one of the things I was going to be working on later. So that's that one. Here's Timothy Jacques. Might be Jacques or something, but it looks like Timothy Jacques. Pardon me, Timothy. Third time asking. Do you have a favorite anime show or movie? No. I don't watch anime. I don't watch any of the Japanese animation. I find it hard to watch. When I was a little boy growing up, I did occasionally, when I was visiting my cousins in Plymouth Meeting, Pennsylvania, I did watch Wee Willie Winky's Colorful Cartoon Show, and we saw some Astro Boy there, and I think Astro Boy was about pretty much my limit to exposure of anime, and I liked Astro Boy okay, but beyond that, I'm not much of an anime guy. I'm not much of an animation guy generally. In fact, some of these animations are spectacularly drawn. I don't know. It's just not for me. My favorite cartoon is Johnny Quest. Johnny Quest was awesome, and I talked about that a couple weeks ago, I think. And here's Pat Bigos, 4th time asking. So we got a 2nd, a 3rd, and a 4th. See, we get to them eventually. I'm not without mercy or pity, you know. Pat Bigos says, 4th time asking, you've spoken about the need for a virtuous society, but how do we have a virtuous society if people live by the motto, if it feels right, do it? Super question. Again, it comes back to the culture, right? It comes back to movies and television. In the 40s, and 50s and 60s, there was a saying that you heard all the time, crime doesn't pay. And the Hays Code in the 30s and out of tradition through the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and into the 60s, there was a long-standing social tradition. It was actually law during the years of the Hays Codes, as I recall, that basically said that you can tell any story you want to, but crime will not triumph at the end. And neither will licentiousness, and neither will evil. You just couldn't do it. You just wouldn't do it. That's why when Stalin, it was either Stalin or Lenin, I think it was Stalin, in the late 40s, early 50s, when he was really starting to ramp up the Cold War, Stalin, the quote's close to this, he said something like, America is like a healthy body. Their religion, their morality, and their patriotism makes them virtually invincible. Destroy those 3 things and they'll be finished. And that's exactly what happened. The reason that we live in a society where if it feels right, do it, is because we learn if it feels right, do it. We learn this from movies and television. Every movie you see is about drug users or drug dealers. Every TV show is about drug use, drug dealers. You know, kids are getting sexualized now. You hear about sexting at age 12. And who am I kidding? I bet it's age 9 now. I wouldn't be the slightest bit surprised if it was 6. And everything is sexualized, and everything is hedonism, and hedonism is glorified. So the real answer to your question, honestly, Pat, is when you look out into society, what examples do you see of if it feels good, do it? And the answer is all of them. What examples do you see of discipline, hard work, self-restraint, and delayed gratification being the answer to a happy life? You used to see it all the time, and now you don't. It's a Wonderful Life is the story about a man who's basically delayed gratification his entire life, feels like he never got his reward, pines away for the instant gratification of wanting all the things that he's always wanted and didn't get, and has shown the fact that no, not only did your impact and your virtue and your delay of gratification, not only did it save the world, your entire universe, everything that you touched is saved because of your goodness, but you personally are far happier than you ever would have been if you'd gone chasing your hedonistic desires. If George Bailey had gone to college and George Bailey had struck up with the wrong crowd, then George Bailey would have been an alcoholic, perhaps, and George Bailey never would have met, oh my God, what is her name? I can't believe I've forgotten her name. God, she was so gorgeous. I want to say Donna something. Whoever his wife was. Hey, look, I'm sick again. Whoever his wife was in It's a Wonderful Life, she had a TV show for a while. She was so beautiful. I thought she was just fantastic. He never would have met her. So you learn from the culture, and that's the answer, Pat. The answer of getting it back is I should not look down, because when the camera sees my hair, I get jaundice. My hair has the magical ability to impart jaundice upon anybody who looks directly upon it. You learn it from the culture. And like everything else you learn from the culture, which is why everything I'm doing now is trying to raise money and try to raise awareness for, Donna Reed, thank you, for movies and examples. You have to have examples. You have to show people. My God, here come 15 Donna Reeds. Thank you very much. So that's what you do. You have to change the culture. You've got no choice. You cannot talk people into it. You can't give them a website. You can't issue a position paper from the Heritage Foundation. You have to show them how you live better by being virtuous. Because people have a right to do, if it feels good, do it. What they're really saying is, I want to be as happy as possible. Hedonistic lifestyles like that actually, generally speaking, make you miserable over the long term. Over the short term, they can be fabulous. And so you have to show people the consequences of, if it feels good, do it, and show them the negative consequences, show them the positive consequences. It's a Wonderful Life was all about that. And that's all people ever saw. And, it works. So if you advertise one thing, you get one thing. You advertise something else, you get the other thing. And I think we're about done here. We got one more question. It's 7 o'clock and a little short show tonight, but I've done a bunch that are a little longer. The Gators played last night in number 3 Florida Gators. I was amazed. Amazed is not the word. Astonished, shocked, and actually a little mortified that I couldn't believe that they won 11-1. But they sure didn't look 11-1 last night. This is the worst Gator team I've ever seen in terms of, well, not the worst I've ever seen. When I went to school, we were 0-10-1. That was my first season. But that's the first Gator squad I've seen that got some prominence. They just couldn't move the football. I'm not a big fan of this current coach myself personally. But here's my final question, and it comes from Will Diamond, who says, why did you choose UF instead of FSU? Go Noles. Well, that's a great question, Will. And the answer is, as I'm sure you know, Florida State University used to be the Florida State College for Women. It's a girls' school, and it still is. So, FSU, half-assed you, where the women are women and the men are too. So hopefully that'll answer your question. And, oh, wait, hang on a second. I just see... We got this to show you right here, pal. And you'll remember the look of this creature here, because this is the one that just whooped you this year. And there was a couple of off years which were statistical flukes, but I don't, what was it, 8 or 9 in a row prior to this? So da-dun, da-dun, dun 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 ba ba da 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 da. Go Gators! Come on, Gators, get up and go. Last thing I'll say about my freaking beloved Gators is just simply this: I'm not a fan of the kind of football they played this year. I was more of a fan of the kind of football they played under Urban Meyer. But what I miss what I miss in my heart of hearts more than anything else in the whole wide world is I miss Steve Spurrier's 1994, 95, 96 Fun and Gun. I miss the Florida Gators. You know, Spurrier, when in the championship season and the year before that too, where we went to the national championship, got walloped by Ohio State. But during those glory years of the Fun and Gun, when Steve Spurrier lost the coin toss, we received first, and when we won the coin toss, we received first. Spurrier wanted the ball. Spurrier in '96, I forget the exact number, but I think that year we scored a touchdown on our first possession in 9 consecutive games. And there is nothing more beautiful in my mind's eye than the sight of the 3 fastest wide receivers on the face of planet Earth streaking down the sideline, each one of them going into double coverage, and watching Danny Werfel, who would never make it as a pro quarterback, but who had a precision pass, the likes of which I've never seen. Not a great arm, not a great quarterback by the pro standards. He just won a national championship in the Heisman, that's all. And watching Danny Werfel put that ball in the 2 inches or 3 inches, 40, 50, 60 yards downfield where Jacquez Green or these guys could get it and the defenders couldn't. It's just the best football I've ever seen. It's the best football I've ever seen. I've never, ever, ever, ever seen football better than that. That was just glorious. I miss it so much. And as we're about to go, I see on my comment stream here, live stream, it says, "My friend loves you and is dying for you to just say Alan West." Well, I will say Alan West. One of the great, amazing parts of my life is to meet the kind of people. We walloped Ohio State many years later. We lost to them in '95. Is to meet people who've been my heroes all my life. And somebody put up on my Facebook page not too long ago, they said that Alan West had said on his Facebook page that I was his favorite political commentator. And that was a signal honor of my life, because I think Alan West is the best politician in the country. I think Alan West is the best man in the country in politics. I think Alan West understands how to defend these arguments. He's smart as a whip, and he just loves this country, and it would be my signal honor to do anything that I can in the next 2 years in this in the role of this silly little virtual presidency thing that we're going to do, to get Alan West elected as president of the United States. I don't know how we do better than that. That's exactly what we need. That's exactly what we need. We need Alan West. We need guys like him. We need guys like you. We need to get the people back into politics. It's 7:02. I got to run. I got to bounce. So sorry for the short show tonight, and we will do it again next week, I'm sure. So for episode 24 of the Stratosphere Lounge, thanks again for joining us. I'm Bill Whittle. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.